Welcome to this edition of The Story Behind the Gear. And today I'm going to talk about my journey with cymbals over the last, I'm going to say 48, 49 years. I started playing drums in 1975 officially. I played drums in the school band when I was, sixth grade, all the way up through sophomore year of high school when I got a drum kit. And when I got my drum kit in October of 1975, my grandmother bought me a Ludwig Vistalite kit in the Hollywood configuration with the flat bass stands. And it was the beginning of my drumming career. In high school, I wanted to play drums. I started to learn how to play drums. Never gave up on playing drums. Matter of fact, I studied percussion in college. I've got a degree in music. And I have played professionally, and I've done all kinds of gigs. So let's talk about the cymbals of the first era of my career. The first era of my career was cymbals that I acquired after the first kit my grandmother bought me in 1975. My first kit had a Rock 21, a Zildjian Rock 21 ride, which was popular in the 70s. They weren't called 21-inch rock ride, even though that's what it was. They were called Rock 21s. It was a 20-inch heavy ride cymbal with a heavy pingy bell. Very, not quite a ping ride, but it was a rock ride, and it rocked. It was terrible to crash on, but it was fine to ride on. And I had a pair of 14-inch new beat hi-hats. So, what I'm going to do today is going to take you from this point in time until my second period of time where I will have another video on the Sabian era. The Sabian era came in right around the time I started to do a little bit of touring with Saved by Grace, and I will explain the Sabian era at that point in time. I didn't have an endorsement, but I got a lot of Sabians in one shot, and that started my Sabian journey, which I spent a lot of time playing Sabian cymbals, more than any of you know by watching my drum cover videos. And then the last phase will be the phase that I call 2010s. In the 2010s, I started to try to find a new voice out of the Sabians, back to Zildjians, and arrived at Paistes. And I will explain that journey. So there's three distinct phases. Phase one is the early drumming, college, high school, early gigs, right up to my first recording session in Nashville, which I used these same cymbals, to the point of doing a little bit of touring with Saved by Grace, the second era being the Sabian era, where I did weddings and club dates and gigs and original bands and big stage stuff I did, all the way up to 2010-ish, 2012, which was my Sabian era. And then somewhere around 2013, I started to really get into the idea of Zildjians and Paistes. Now, what you will find out is throughout my career, I did not have one brand of cymbal that I played. I played a lot of different brands. Now, I will be referencing these 3 pages of over 100 different cymbals that I've owned over my career. So today, we're going to only be focusing on this much of the page, because the early part of the career, I didn't have a lot of money, and there wasn't a lot to draw from. But I will explain some of the stories and some of that journey. So, 1975 Blue Vistalite kit. I have a Rock 21 ride. I've got a pair of 14-inch new beat hi-hats, and that's the starting point. I needed a crash cymbal, and I didn't have one. So I borrowed a 15-inch marching cymbal from the high school band room. Nobody cared about this cymbal. I had it for a long time. I think I eventually sold it, to be honest. So you could say I did more than borrow it. That was my childhood. You know what I mean? I was a Catholic kid, but I was just as much a rambunctious kid as any other kid. And when you saw something that nobody cared about and was left in the dirt, this was under a pile of junk in this band room that this band director didn't care about. By the way, the band director didn't care enough about me to even give me a recommendation letter to get into music school. So that's how bad that was. My high school years were not my happiest years of my life. I will say that high school years were some of the toughest years of my life. I had to grow up and I had to get over adversity and people not particularly liking me or doing things for me, like the band director. I was one of the only kids in my school that was going to study music, and I couldn't get a recommendation from the band director. But that's not here nor there. I had some very good friends during high school, too. And one of them, I will tell you, his name is Billy McCabe. And Billy McCabe and I used to play drums together in his basement or at my house. And we put records on and play Chicago and other music from that time period, Buddy Rich and other things. And we both had interesting drum kits, and he had some interesting cymbals. And one day I would end up getting Billy's drum kit, but that will be part of the second phase of stories. So during this phase, 1975 to 1979, I had the Blue Vistalite kit. Then I went to college. Now, that original Blue Vistalite kit, I only had a few cymbals. Eventually, I bought a Zildjian thin crash, 16-inch thin crash, and it became the Rock 21 and the thin crash. And then I wanted to get a China cymbal, because the guy, like Danny Serafin in Chicago had some kind of a Pang cymbal. And I was big on looking at catalogs. I had all the catalogs. I still have all the catalogs. And I still own all the catalogs I had when I was a kid. They're all beat up and torn up like kids do to them, and they got numbers written in them and some ink pen on them. They're not vintage enough to sell on eBay for any money, but they're my personal items. I've got the Ludwig catalog, the Slingerland catalogs, the Sonar catalogs from the 70s. And I've got some Zildjian product, too, from the 70s. And I looked at this stuff, and I watched what drummers were using. I tried to learn what drummers were using. And then when Modern Drummer magazine came out in 1978, that was the first time I saw it. It was the Tony Williams issue. I was amazed at what I would start to learn about drums and cymbals and other things. But prior to that, all I had to go on was these catalogs at the drum store, the music store in New Jersey called Blue Note Music in Long Branch. So, the thin crash was the second cymbal, and I don't have any of these. And the next cymbal, I wanted something that was like a swish, but when I went to I actually bought this cymbal at Sam Goody Music, believe it or not. Sam Goody Music was a record store in the Monmouth Mall. And I went to Sam Goody's, and they had some cymbals in there. And I said, I really want an 18-inch sizzle cymbal. And I called it a sizzle cymbal. I really wanted a swish, and they ordered it for me. And what I got was an 18-inch crash ride sizzle cymbal with 8 holes in it and a bigger bell, because it was supposed to be a crash ride. And I had that cymbal. And it didn't have that swish sound, but I bought it. Because I ordered it, I had to buy it. It was already paid for, so I picked it up. And I was shocked. I didn't really like it. But it was one of my cymbals. Eventually, I would take all the rivets out, and that 18-inch sizzle crash ride and the 16-inch thin would be my cymbal for a long time, it seemed like. Well, then I went to college. So I had the Rock 21, I had the 16-inch thin cymbal, I had the 18-inch sizzle cymbal, and eventually, I did get a swish cymbal. And I got that swish cymbal out of my high school band director's closet that was full of junk. I found this burnt up Zildjian swish, 18-inch swish. No holes in it. It had US stamped on it like it was from the Army. It was trashy and nasty, as trashy as any Wuhan you ever wanted to touch. And as a matter of fact, my good friend Scott Hazen, who I talk about a lot, has that cymbal to this day. He worked at Blue Note Music, and one day when I didn't like it anymore, I bought a Pang cymbal. I traded that one in, and he picked that up out of the pile for like $10 or something. I think they gave me $10. I think he paid $10 to get it back. So he has that cymbal to this day. But I would go from an 18-inch swish cymbal to a 20-inch thin Pang cymbal, and then another 20-inch thin Pang cymbal. I ended up buying 2 20-inch thin Pangs. And one I don't know what happened, but I eventually sold one of them. And then I even bought, in 1979, 78, while I was in college, I bought a 22-inch swish, which had rivets in it, sizzle. And that was really the one I wanted. I wanted a swish cymbal with rivets in it. So my early kit, right up to buying this kit, was an 18-inch sizzle cymbal, crash ride, a 16-inch thin, a Rock 21, a pair of 14-inch hi-hats, and I had these a variety of China pangs, and then eventually a 22-inch swish with rivets. And I'll show you some pictures of this kit, actually the 79 kit, with those cymbals on it when I played a gig at my home church in New Jersey. And I think it was like an outdoor concert I have some photos of, so I'll pull some of them out. And you'll see that swish cymbal there, and you'll see the Rock 21. So my early cymbals were Zildjian. That's what they were. Now, when I got to college, we used to go into New York City and frequent the drum shops in New York. And one of the drum shops is where I bought this drum kit at, the 1979 Gretsch kit. I bought it at Frank Ippolito's Professional Percussion Center in New York City. And Frank had just passed away. Jane had taken over the store. I bought this kit from a guy named Tim Herman, who was the sales guy, and he built snare drums. And Tim Herman sold me this kit with Pearl hardware on it. He said, don't get the Gretsch hardware, and it came with a 12, 13, 14, 16, and a 20-inch bass drum. He tried to sell me the GAD sizes, but I wanted floor toms. Thank God I did that. I'm very happy I bought floor toms that day with the 20-inch bass drum. Love the 20-inch bass drum. I've had it for a long time. My first kit had a 22. I wanted a 20. What happened after I bought this kit in 79 was the next time I went into New York looking for a cymbal was around 1980, and that's where I found a Paiste 505 16-inch crash. And it sounded better than any of the Zildjians in the store, and I couldn't afford the 2002, so I hit the Paiste 505 crash, green label, and bought it. And that cymbal stuck with me. I really liked it. Another cymbal I got somewhere in that same period was an 8-inch splash. I bought that at Blue Note Music. I remember buying another flat bass stand to put it on because booms were not very popular in the late 70s yet. They were becoming popular, but they weren't really popular. And I couldn't afford them anyhow. And that 8-inch splash would one day get trashed by my brother. When I was away in college, he'd be banging on my drums, and he banged the snot out of that 8-inch splash and cracked it. This is the replacement 8-inch splash that I will tell you the story about once I get through the college 505 crash. But the 505 crash, and there was another crash cymbal I bought in college, which was a Zildjian medium thin 15-inch crash. So I cracked the 16, had a crack in it, 16 thin, and I bought a Zildjian medium thin 15-inch crash. So I had a 15 and I had a 16 with crack in it and had holes drilled in it. And I don't know if I may have a picture of that somewhere. But when I bought the 505 crash, it kind of changed everything. And that was somewhere around 80, 81-ish. Okay. I don't know if I had them the day I did the concert. I think that was like in 81. So I might have got the Paiste in 81. But I got that before I left college. And the rest is history, you know, when you really look at it. The 505 stuck on my kit for a long time. And I really had an affinity to Paistes in the early 80s. And I wanted Paistes, but I couldn't afford Paistes. The other thing I really wanted, which came out of getting a Paiste catalog at a music store, was a set of Rude hi-hats. Okay? So now I'm out of college, and I'm playing gigs. I'm starting to do weddings and club dates and stuff. And I eventually get married. And when I get married, I got gigs going on. I'm playing. And I told my wife I really want a set of Rude hi-hats. Well, my wife, in 1984, I'm going to jump the story to 84 because that's about what happened. You know, my cymbal setup was pretty much stable until about 1984, after I was married, and two things happened. The first thing was, for my birthday in 1984, was this set of hi-hats. So I bought, my wife bought me the Paiste Rude hi-hats with the 14 on the top, the 14s, of course, no sound edge. And I used these cymbals for a long time. These are probably my main set of hi-hats pretty much into the 80s and 90s. You know, I used them. I was using them again. I was using them all the time. I can't believe how much I use these hi-hats. They're so used that the root came off. And the other thing that is it's super keyholed. That's a super keyhole. So this cymbal's been played a lot. And that's why it doesn't get much play today, to be honest, because it's keyhole and it's almost retired in some way. It's almost like Gad's keyholing, like his cymbals. I kind of feel like this cymbal doesn't get played very often. Pulled it out the other day to do something. So 1984, my 24th birthday, my wife bought me these hi-hats. And then that Christmas, she knew where to buy stuff. My wife knew where to buy it. She went to Modern Drum Shop. It's actually stamped with Modern Drum Shop on here. And she bought me this 8-inch splash so I could get an 8-inch splash cymbal. And this 8-inch splash, these rude hi-hats, that Rock 21 ride, that sizzle, 18-inch sizzle ride crash, the 15-inch medium thin crash cymbal, and the Paiste 505 crash were cymbals I used on gigs for a long time, well into the 80s. And truthfully, that's my early connection to Paiste, was the 505 cymbals. And that's really my sound, my early sound, right up through doing the Saved by Grace album. And what I brought to Nashville, I brought the Rock 21, I brought those crash cymbals. That's the stuff I played on the album. Matter of fact, I remember putting up the rude hi-hats. I had the Roods and the Avitas New Beats. And the engineer was like, get those things off. Play those other cymbals, because I was playing, at that time, I played a lot more like this when I played hi-hats, you know. Kind of always laying into it. And the engineer's name was Ronnie Brookshire. He said to me, can you play your hi-hats really soft and your kick and snare really loud? And that was the lesson I had to learn to play in the studio in Nashville in 1987 when I cut that album. And I've been working on that ever since. Versus. See, studio guys know you got to get the cymbals out of the mics, and that means you got to play lighter with the right hand and heavier with the left hand. Now, I've come to learn that overly playing the left hand isn't much better either. It kind of distorts things and doesn't make for a great drum track. But that's the story. So my journey takes me with a mixed bag of Zildjians and Paistes. Sabian was born in the middle of this. I started seeing Sabian in the Modern Drummer magazines in the early 80s. And in the United States, you couldn't get Sabians until 1982. And by 1987, I was aware of Sabian cymbals very much. And that would be the next place I would go in my journey. So anyhow, that's the starting point. Part 1 is the early journey of my cymbals. If you have any questions, leave a question or a comment or a thought. Now, I will say one other thing I want to say is I didn't have a defined sound I was going for. But I will tell you one thing about that 18-inch crash ride. One of the things, I went to a jazz college. I went to a college where guys played jazz. It was Jersey City State College. Now it's called New Jersey City University. And I remember pulling that 18-inch crash ride sizzle cymbal out. And some of the jazz guys in the school loved that cymbal. And they offered me money to take that cymbal. And I did not give that cymbal up. Matter of fact, I didn't give that cymbal up until the 90s. Which I wish I never got rid of that cymbal. That was one of those cymbals I think back and I look back and go, I wish I never got rid of, even though I never wanted it when I bought it. It was something I pre-ordered from Zildjian, came into Sam Goodies, and I basically got stuck with it. When I first got it, I said, what is this stupid thing? I really wanted a swish, not a sizzle. But it was a great little 18-inch ride cymbal. You could play it as a ride cymbal, and it was kind of cool. I would start to realize those things. Those were the things I would start to realize by the late 80s as my gigging and my playing started to mature and change. So that's the next one. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. If you've got a question, leave a question. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time, bye.